A child is kidnapped from a mysterious island. 4 children run up a mountain to watch a tunnel being built for demolition work and never come back. The police and residents search the mountain for days. In the end, only the girl, Irene, was found. The 3 remaining boys seem to have disappeared without a trace. The words of the surviving girl, Irene, were even more frightening. The mother had died. Irene had to move to the island with her stepfather. She doesn't get on well with her stepfather. She has no friends at her new school. Irene then fell in love with reading about spirits. She created words to communicate with ghosts and spirits. At this point, Irene meets Ian, who has been living in an orphanage. They were both interested in the supernatural and equally lonely. They soon became good friends. They communicate with each other using special symbols created by Irene. Adventures in an old house in the mountains. They even secretly became boyfriend and girlfriend. That day, they went to the mountains with their 2 other friends, Bill and Kevin, to see a blast. They found a deep hole in the tree. Playful, they immediately dove in. Inside, a clear spring glistened. On closer inspection, there was a glowing rock at the bottom. Ian jumped in, but when the stone was brought up, it stopped shining. Kevin remembered a legend that his grandfather had told him. A tree cave appears in a hills at full moon. Inside there was a monster that swallowed time. Could this be it? At that moment, Eileen realized her hairpan was missing. She goes back into the cave to get it. Suddenly there is an earthquake. A glowing stone reappears in the spring. She climbs out with all her might, but the 3 boys were missing. Only the egg was broken to the ground. She thought a monster was really at work, but the hole in the tree where the crime took place had disappeared, and the broken egg was nowhere to be seen. No one believed her. The parents even thought she was crazy. Soon after, the police found Bu's body buried in a playground 20 kilometers from the village. There were no external injuries on his body. He appeared to have died of an asthma attack. A few days later, the clothes Bill had worn on the day he disappeared had been deliberately left on his doorstep. Such a shock sent Eileen into despair. She had been in the cave for only 2 or 3 minutes in total to get the hairband. Had her memory really gone haywire? That's when she suddenly received a signal from Ian. She went up the mountain and met a strange older man. He claimed to be Ian 15 years later. Eileen runs home like crazy. Her stepfather called the police. The police searched the mountain and found a notebook. It was left by the strange man, but it was full of special code words between her and Ian. A record of strange things that happened to the 3 boys. When Eileen went to the cave to get her hairpan, the stone suddenly moved. They thought there was a small animal inside. They opened it and saw a strange wind came out. In an instant, all sound was gone. Inside the cave, Irene didn't move a muscle. The birds in the sky were still too. They walked down the hill to the town and the same thing happened. At first, they thought it was funny. They could do anything, peeking under the skirts of the girls and eating in the restaurant for free. Because it was stationary, none of the food would spoil. They could eat as much as they wanted. All the toys in the supermarket are free to take. Weightless space, where they can just throw things and they stop in midair. Very interesting, but after a while, they start to get confused. Even the mirror can't see their faces. Such a bizarre world. How on earth could they get out? A boy, Kevin, suggested leaving the island to look further afield. Maybe time moves there, but the boat won't start and the water is freezing. The plan to go beyond the island has failed. Bu's asthma is also acting up. He died unexpectedly because he didn't have his medication with him. There was no gravity and they flew his body like a kite to his favorite playground. Then the 2 of them dug a hole and buried Bill's body. 5 years and 5 months passed and nothing had changed. They grew up to be 20 years old. There was too much time to waste time, so they started teaching themselves. They saved money in a special way, but their memory was getting worse and they forgot many things from the past. So they chose to go home to the abandoned cottage in the hills. It was the secret home of the boy Ian and Eileen. It was here that he had carved the statue of Irene out of soap. It was this kind of affection that's what gave him the idea to persevere in this other world. He kept carving with soap, piling it up on the walls to create a giant portrait of Irene. He thought that if he concentrated on one thing, time would pass more quickly, and so it went on for almost 15 years. Fear haunted them. Ian had occasional moments of sadness. Kevin, on the other hand, was severely depressed and on the verge of collapse. He just disappeared. Ian searched the entire island for him. During this time, he noticed that the moon in the sky kept changing. It was only a little, but it gave him hope. But when he finally found Kevin's clothes on the edge of a cliff, he was devastated. He jumped just like Kevin. In the water, Ian and Kevin saw each other one last time. Suddenly, the moon became full. The fish in the sea began to swim. Ian was washed up on the shore. He had got used to life in that world when he returned to the normal world. Instead, he felt scared despite the adult appearance of a 30-year-old. He was still the teenager he once was inside. There was no room for him anywhere. He had to hide in a dark corner, not knowing how much courage it took to go to Irene. Only she would believe him. Irene arrives at the secret base. She saw the same scars on his hands as Ian's. The two of them hugged each other and cried. From then on, Irene used to bring him food and take him to wash and cut his hair. Ian was still very uncomfortable with the noise of the world. Eileen stayed with him for a time of peace. They bought clothes with the money they stole during the still time. They wanted to make the others accept Ian as an adult too. Back to their old lives. That's when the police went through the court footage. They found Ian, who had brought Kevin's clothes home. The police thought he had kidnapped the children, so a citywide manhunt for Ian was launched. The parents were not happy with Aria's attitude. The stepdad didn't want her to continue with the crazy talk either and just locked her in the house. Ian goes alone to the director of the orphanage. A child who had obviously only been missing for a few days suddenly becomes a 30-year-old adult. It's hard to believe. Even if he was once her closest director, the mother-like person was now looking at Ian warily. Ian talked a lot about his childhood. The dean only thought of him as a kidnapper. Stepdad even found photos of the secret base by looking through Eileen's phone and called the police. Adults are often reluctant to accept things that are beyond their understanding. In their perceptions, they only think in conventional terms. Irene thought about the egg in the hole. If it was broken in front of everyone, just so they could see the time pause to. Ian understood the pain. He didn't want to get others involved. The two of them had the idea of running away from the island together to leave somewhere where no one would know them. So they went back to the secret base to get the money. The stepfather had been ambushed early and knocked Ian to the ground. Eileen's cries and defiance eventually failed to win any patience or trust. Ian wounds his stepfather and the two escape for the night, but they needed to buy a boat ticket. They couldn't leave at all. The news is soon on the television and the police are everywhere. Eileen decides to use herself to distract the police so Ian can get away. She still stuck to her story and wanted the police to verify fingerprints and DNA and other information. The police just dismissed it as crazy talk. In the end, she escaped through the bathroom window. It was the night of the full moon and the hole in the tree reappeared. She took out the glowing egg to verify Ian's story, or the two of them could go live together in the stillness of the other world. Having experienced 15 years of stillness and longevity, witnessing the depressive suicide of a good friend, Ian was afraid of losing Eileen again. He was even more reluctant to put her through that kind of pain. He decided to turn himself in and confess to being the kidnapper. It was the only solution. Suddenly, the ground starts to shake and the hole in the tree falls down, and the police came up